RUHINYUZA. There was once a man called RUHINYUZA who had 10 children. He had inherited enough land on which he grew crops to sustain his family. In those days, it was a custom for a man to have as many children as possible. In fact, couples were despised by society. As his wifey continued giving a birth, the family grew larger every year such that in the end, his harvest could no longer satisfy their needs. The more the children grew older, the more the family grew poorer. One evening, RUHINYUZA summoned all his children and told them, "My children, we do not have enough to eat and I cannot expand our piece of land. Besides, your mother and I are too old to work for other people. This situation leaves us no other alternative except stealing." The whole family, after seriously considering any other available option, agreed unanimously to their father's suggestion. That decision made each family member into a licensed thief. As soon as the decision had been made, RUHINYUZA left the house. Kamonzi's house was only 1 kilometer away. He reached its compound. He could hear his heartbeat. He thought that his chest would burst any time. He pressed it with his left hand while the other one held a spear. Cautiously, he approached the door. He waited a little bit and then pushed it open. He tiptoed in and found everyone asleep. Kamonzi's wife had given a birth to a baby, a girl, that evening. The little girl and her mother were lying on the traditional mat in the living room. It was almost midnight. Suddenly, he heard a voice from above saying, "Welcome to the world, little girl. You will grow into a beautiful girl. Everybody will admire you before being killed by an elephant tusk at a very young age." RUHINYUZA knew it was the voice of God and felt a strong urge to challenge it. He changed his mind and decided, "Let me see whether God really tells the truth." He carefully went where the mother and the baby were sleeping, pierced his spear where he thought the baby was, and left the house in a hurry without taking anything. The following morning, he visited Kamonzi's house expecting to find them mourning because he had killed their baby. He was surprised to find everything is normal. He had actually missed the target. Meanwhile, Kamonzi welcomed his friend and was very glad to inform him that his wife had given birth to a baby girl. RUHINYUZA could see the happy mother cuddling her beautiful baby. "This is incredible," he thought. RUHINYUZA was offered some wine. He pretended to enjoy his host's reception, but he soon got bored and went back to his house. The voice he heard on the day he had gone to steal was still vivid in his mind. He felt embarrassed. The fact nobody saw him trying to kill the child was only consolation. Meanwhile, his economic situation improved slowly but steadily as some of his children grew old enough to fend for themselves. He had also married off some of his daughters and had received many cows as dowry. He had become a very important person in the village. However, his mind was preoccupied by what he did to his neighbor, although nobody knew anything about it. The secret grew heavier as days, months, and years passed. The thought of sharing it with anybody else scared him stiff. This situation was worsened by the fact that very girl he had wanted to kill grew up into a very beautiful woman. Furthermore, he had become very rich and many people in the village had started urging him to marry her. In those days, it was acceptable for an old man to marry a girl who would be his daughter's age. He thought that would be a good idea if he married her, as it would reduce his burden. He finally decided to marry her. He asked his servant to prepare a very good wine which should be ready within 1 week. When the wine was ready, he asked his friends and relatives to escort him to Kamonzi's home to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. RUHINYUZA's delegation reached his future in-laws' home before noon. They were warmly received and the ceremony started immediately. They drank, sang and danced. Kamonzi agreed to give his daughter to RUHINYUZA, a fact that attracted applause and ululations from the crowd. 1 month later, he came to pay the dowry. Was allowed to take his wife. That marriage became the talk of the season in that area, as both the bride and the bridegroom were village's most popular individuals. The bride had been exemplary in all household tasks, while the bridegroom was mostly known for having seen both heights for any economic situation. As his invited guests were enjoying themselves on the wedding day, the voice he had heard when the girl was born was still fresh in his mind. He looked at his new wife and appreciated her beauty. He remembered the night he had wanted to stab her. He could feel the girl was well. He could feel the wine taste that Kamonzi had offered him. Then he started imagining how an elephant will one day pierce his beloved wifey with one of its tusks. All this made him feel very sad. Will elephant come all the way from the forest to this village just to kill my wife? Will my wife leave the village to find the elephant in the forest? He asked himself. He could not find any answer. Everyone could see that he looked sad, but none dared to ask him. They preferred enjoying their wine. When the ceremony was over, he called his servants and instructed them never to let his new wifey leave the compound. In order to ensure that it would be done, he asked them never to leave her alone. He even allowed them to use force to prevent her from venturing out if they found it necessary. He thought that in case elephant came, those men surrounding his wife would kill it before it did her any harm. Then he reassured himself and went about his usual business. The servant followed their master's instructions to the letter, and there was not very difficult, as the woman proved to be extremely obedient. One day, while the young wife was basking in the early morning sun with her bodyguards, a stressed antelope dashed out of the nearby bush like lightning. An army of angry hunting dogs were after it. It was a very short but spectacular moment. The excitement made new wife move towards the fence to see the scene more clearly. She stepped on something sharp. She felt an itching pain but ignored it due to the excitement. None of her bodyguards noticed the incident because she considered it so insignificant that she did not even alert anybody about it. However, the pain persisted. She scratched her foot at the place that had been pierced. The wound was not visible but still painful. She thought that the pain would soon disappear, but by noon, her leg had started swelling. By the evening, the pain from the swelling. By the evening, the pain from the swollen leg became unbearable. Her husband called for the best medicine men in the area, but the leg continued swelling. By midnight she was dead. Surely, God must be a liar, he asserted angrily. No elephant had been seen in the area for several years. Furthermore, her bodyguards had assured him that she had been sitting the previous day. He instructed his servant to dig up the whole compound. Much debris was unearthed. A protruding object near the fence attracted his attention. On looking at it closely, he was shocked to find that it was indeed a broken piece of an elephant tusk which had been killed there by hunters when he was still a young boy. He could not do anything to the bodyguards because they had followed his instruction and kept his wife within the compound. He then remembered the fateful night when he attempted to steal. He remembered the voice. He remembered the warm welcome that Kamonzi gave him the following morning. He started making arrangements for burial. They stayed at RUHINYUZA's home for a week. RUHINYUZA kept quiet throughout the mourning period. Then he prepared some wine and invited all his friends, including Komani's family. When they came, he narrated how he had come to Komonzi's house to steal and how he changed his mind when he heard the voice of God. He told them how he wanted to challenge God by killing the baby. He explained why he decided to marry her and keep her indoors so that no elephant would ever see her, only for her to step on a fragment of a decomposed elephant tusk that had been buried right where she was being heavily guarded. He asked them to forgive him, adding that above all, he had learnt that God is really the mighty. The crowd forgave him for everything he had done. Everyone went home more convinced than ever God means what he says.